And we're live.
Not yelling penis.
This is not a
Scissory
show.
Timbers.
Oh my goodness. Scissor Sisters? You know, true story. I actually have a hairdresser that has a shop and it is called Dying to Get Scissored, and she happens to be a lesbian. I'm just saying.
Oh.
Get it? Dying to
She
Get
has
Scissored?
double entendre in the name that she put on the salon.
I know, isn't that shocking? So
I had a relative who's had a side business doing electrical work, and it was called Spark After Dark. We remove your shorts.
Hang on, didn't our lovely hostess said she had a planned opening? Shouldn't we let her do that?
yeah, there was a planned opening. So really quick, we do have a panel of mixed people who have different backgrounds. So real quick, we're going to go from left to right on my screen. I have Barney. Barney, go ahead and wave since you're on camera. Yay, Barney. See, this is Barney. He's our resident Croatian, and he is a, oh my gosh, I just forgot. I want to say you were atheist
or agnostic, depending on your theory of knowledge.
Well, what the hell is a Croatian? I'm still waiting on you to explain that.
I'm belief fluid.
And then we got Cliff Jumper, atheist, biker extraordinaire. We have Dragnut. I just did a Gman. The nemesis of Gman, the man that is crushing of Gman and stronger than Gman, but also who Gman would like to be.
Yeah, keep going, keep going.
Someone who...
The mighty Dragnot Plus a few weights around the middle, if you know what I mean.
Some sort of science atheist guy. I don't know. and then we have Fiona, who is a Catholic and
not a proper Christian.
Not a proper Christian ever. No. She does adhere to every single Christian creed, but you know, who's counting for history and understanding that? So definitely somebody, if you want to learn about biology, she's the one to go to. And then our guest of honor here is Jade, who has been the focus of Gman's verbal assaults on her personhood and her orientation and her actual faith herself recently.
The drama, it's been too much. Oh
man. And so Jade, I always look at you as sort of a jack of all trades, somebody that really knows a lot about a different subject. So it's always a pleasure having you in the group. And we have Jim, who is also a Catholic. Jim issued a challenge to Gman, and Gman wimped out. So just
Within bleach apple.
What was that?
Within 30 minutes.
Within 30 minutes?
Yeah.
I decided that he just saw how small your channel was and decided that he wouldn't take you up on it.
No, he blamed me for it.
I think it was a double thing. I think it was he challenged him, but also saw that. But also Veckel told him that he'd been, lining up the bullshit, and so he's like, "Oh, I'm not going to do this now because you're going to hold me accountable for my actions." I'm guessing. So
how shocking! How shocking! We have actual video evidence of the stupidity that he hurls at people.
And let's not forget, Gman never ever backs down from a debate ever.
Never. And then Scott's not paying attention here. So I like to call Scott, his position is
It's accurate.
Especially when he's being asked a question.
I'm going to just call him an agnostic heathen.
Sorry. Scott's a Pythonist.
Oh
Monkey,
boy,
that is.
I wouldn't overstate that too much. Python is a language that I have toyed with. It is not my bread and butter.
But at least you got the reference to
all I know is nobody wants to touch your Python or Python itself. So
I don't want that puppet here. No.
I'll touch his Python.
His Python don't want none unless you got Linux, son.
Can you recite the Zen of Python?
We got Shadow here. Shadow is an anabolic atheist.
According to Gman, who can't actually say apathetic.
Anabolic atheist. Is an anabolic the thing that happens when things break down and actually like
Doesn't
turn into
anabolic
manure?
As
more
in
syllables than
steroids?
apathetic?
Anabolic steroid. I should be like roid atheist.
Roid
Doesn't-
atheist.
Roid atheist,
Does
the opposite
anabolic-
of Roy Montero.
Oh,
Doesn't
dear.
anabolic have more syllables than apathetic?
Yep, apatheist. I just don't care.
Drama Llama. If you don't know who that is, that's Drama Llama. Drama Llama's
Drama
awesome.
ding dong, drama in the house. Oh yeah, it's coming later. Just you wait.
And next we have pseudo headless chicken, and he is I don't know what.
Undisclosed.
Headless chicken.
He's clearly a cock. I would know that. No, see what I did there?
Yeah, we did.
Do I get a cookie?
Actually, when
get
I
a
first
cookie
came
for
on
trying.
here, Headless, myself, Brian J, Jade, we were all undisclosed. And frankly, when I decided to hang a tag around my neck, I think it was the worst decision I ever made.
Yeah, because
Because-
you're going to be called an anabolic atheist.
Yeah, I mean, once you actually accept that tag onto yourself, now in my case, I had people vote on whether they thought I was an atheist or not based upon my actual views. But yeah, I actually was able to have real conversations with people. Once that label came in, it was all of a sudden they were talking to the label, not to me anymore.
Jade says she needs a mic check. Jade, are you there?
Unmute first.
Can't hear you, Jade. She's probably swearing.
No, she's not swearing. She's yelling at Freddy.
On Suda being a cock, that circumcision went really wrong.
He's
Oh,
missing
by
the
the way,
head.
Barney, how many Adidas tracksuits do you own?
None. Nope, none.
And my
No,
position,
no tracksuits?
my
No.
position is, I guess,
Missionary.
barely Protestant Christian who sometimes thinks that God interacts a little bit less than what an evangelical says. So I don't know if God walks with you and talks with you and says he's you're his best friend, and or I don't really think that God hates all the same people you do. I just think that maybe the
Jesus
creator's
drives.
bigger than that.
Jesus is your co-pilot, sitting in the passenger seat, fiddling with the radio while you try to drive.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
That's why those songs keep coming on that you don't want to hear.
Oh gosh. Do I? Oh my goodness. There's some songs I really do hate. Jade, are you there?
Dun 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 dun.
Hello, can you hear me? I am Jade.
Jade, darling.
I don't hear any cackling laughter. She
No.
mustn't be here yet.
My orientation is cat lover.
Oh, wait. I saw the mic button go off. Jade.
This is not the mic you're looking for.
Da, 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 da.
Oh, Jade and her mic issues.
Yep.
By the way, I don't think it would be fair to have a go at Headless if he decides to use foul language.
Oh. Cliff, until you're a dad, you're not allowed to make those jokes anymore.
I just lost 3 viewers.
No, honestly, Cliff, that was
Only 3?
Hey,
Cliff's comment
Cliff.
was the most original of all the jokes that anyone's told here tonight.
Cliff,
Okay.
I will thank you to stop infringing on my dad jokes.
Okay, well, we're gonna continue on, and then Jade just kind of, just go. Can you hear me? Just at random. So anyway, one of the things that was inspiring of this hangout is when Jade was getting constantly barraged by insults about her going to hell, that she's not a real Christian, and that she's homosexual, and that she needs to make a video condemning homosexuals in order to be considered even in the running for being a real Christian, and all sorts of stuff like that. And so one of the things I wanted to tackle in this hangout, amongst many things, is not just behavior of Gman in particular, but also homosexuality and the views that we might have. And we might have some different views on this hangout. I have a feeling that Jim and I are a little bit on different spectrums on this, and we both are Christians. So that being said, my particular view is that traditionally I do acknowledge that the Christian church does condemn homosexuality. That is something that traditionally has been done throughout church history. But I will say this, that the Catholic Church at least does acknowledge that it is an orientation, and they do actually say that that they urge people not to practice, but they at least understand that the desire is an orientation, and they don't clobber people for that. I think that is a little bit more advanced than most evangelicals, or at least a good percentage of evangelicals. The Methodist Church is all accepting of homosexuals, and that's probably where I am right now. I don't really think of
My wife was raised Methodist and was really proud when they made that proclamation.
I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think that it causes societal harm. I don't think that it's necessarily the traditional Christian view, but I also don't think that Paul's words were interpreted charitably in history. So,
well, it might be a little strange me coming in here to talk in general about things like homosexuality. I did do a 2-hour Bible study on it, which is a very unusual thing for my channel, but I thought it had to be done. And in some senses, it was a defense of Jade. Now, the drama this week, of course, started with Gman just randomly deciding there's this lesbian online, I'm going to attack her. It just pretty much out of the blue. As far as I know, Jade hadn't had boo to say to him in ages. We'd all pretty damn near forgot he was on here for that matter. I think he was almost just looking for the attention, and then he was shocked when he got it.
Oh, I think so too. I think Gman had an epiphany and said, I want to pick on something that's going to get people agitated. And he picks on Jade because Jade is close to drag.
Everyone, not just drag. I mean, Jade is, she's a titan in this community. She's one of those people you just don't talk shit about because everyone appreciates Jade.
She's almost like a mother to us all, isn't she?
Yeah, it's Mama Jade.
Yeah, Mama Jade.
And the Skype group I'm in, that's what we call her.
So one of the things I like to tackle is what is a Christian? So one of the things that Fiona has done in the past is to defend herself, as she's actually talked about the Apostles' Creed and gone through the Apostles' Creed and what she believes in. And that was enough for some people to be upset about. But the Apostles' Creed covers the Christian essentials in both Protestant and Catholic religion. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't just cover one base, it covers both. And so if you ever get a chance to read the creeds, you would see that it does actually align on both sides of the fence. And then also, additionally, the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. People are supposed to strive for these attributes, or maybe they're even supposed to grow in the Spirit and into these attributes. There was a phrase years ago that was coined called fruit inspector. And anybody that went and took a swing at a fellow Christian would be called a fruit inspector and insulted. But here's the thing. I generally try not to get into fruit inspecting because I believe that we should fruit inspect ourselves and see, are we growing in these traits and making ourselves better? But I've noticed that there are some among us that really love to fruit inspect other people and are not very introspective about themselves. And I would point to Gman for that.
And my long rant about Gman was really just a way of trying to point out that he needs to look at himself first. And granted, I got very vitriolic, and I really called him out on the carpet, and he basically did the bad dog thing in terms of him with that particular video. But really, the core of it is he just needs to look at his behavior, because he's more likely to drive off prospective new Christians, because all the things that epitomize Christianity in terms of the teaching, trying to be Christ-like in essence, showing love and compassion and all these other things towards your fellow man. He doesn't do any of these. No charity work, no nothing. It's all about his own self-aggrandizement, and this is not very Christian. And I say this as somebody that is very much not a Christian. And I find it funny that there are some amongst us that, well, not being Christian and not even being theists in any way, shape, or form, are more prone to call out people for unchristian behavior than the sort that Gman hangs out with. these evangelic types.
I agree. I think that's so disappointing because I think when I look at conservative Christians that maybe have better approaches, I would even look at true empiricism as having a better approach. Like I saw his recent video about homosexuals, and I thought he had a much better approach. I can tolerate that. I don't agree with it, but I can tolerate that. I can talk to somebody like that. I think that it's something to take to heart to know that like the person that you're talking about is a real person. Like they aren't just focused in having sex. When you're talking about same-sex orientation, you're talking about who you wake up and have coffee with. You're talking about who you most likely relate to, who you want to spend time with, intimacy in a way that is not just physical.
You know, given the brand of what should I say, the level of the quality level that we usually get from Ronnie, I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised when I watched that video. It seemed remarkably fair-minded and level-headed of him. At least
I haven't seen it yet. I might actually have to look at it. Huh.
Yeah, well, you see, Ronnie manages to do something which Gman hadn't done. Ronnie managed to realise that a celibate homosexual and practicing homosexual don't mean the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that Gman doesn't seem to grasp, because he made video after video about Jade in which he called her a practicing homosexual. Now, you could say he's making just a mistake, except he's been told over 24 times that she is celibate. So at this stage of the game, I'm left with no other option but to consider that he is knowingly bearing false witness.
Oh yeah, I mean, he doesn't want that. He doesn't want the fact to be true, so he's just going to find a way for it not to be true by just strawmanning her, which is what he does.
No, it's worse than strawmanning. It's worse than strawmanning. It's something that he knows is not true, and yet he is saying it.
True. Yeah. And
plastering it all over YouTube. Something not true. It is bearing false witness.
Well, funny thing is that I went and challenged him the other day in his hangout, and I got to read out some of the Bible that demonstrates that he's just a fucking hypocrite. You know, excuse the language, but I don't think there's any other word. You know, I think it's justified. And because there he is saying Jade is an abomination because of Leviticus. Of course, let's not forget that Leviticus is the Old Testament, the New Covenant. And of course, if you brought that up, he would say, oh, it's New Covenant now. Anyway, so Proverbs 6:16. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. Abomination, remember. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, Gman. Hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, G-Man all over. Just the titles of his videos is that. Feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies. And my favorite example is Alex Botton and Fiona are having an affair, and I have video evidence.
Yeah.
And then anyone who sows discord amongst brothers. Something G-Man does all the time. Remember the Bible thumping wingnut, Matthew 4:19. They're not real Christians because they called him out on, it's not adultery if your wife gives you permission. So, yeah. G-Man is an abomination to God by his own definition, which, of course, then goes into Matthew 7, which is the hypocrisy thing about, don't complain about the speck in your brother's eye when you got a log in yours, or in G-Man's case, several forests.
I'll read that passage out. And this goes back to what 13 was saying about introspection. And in fact, in this passage, Christ is telling you that you should be doing introspection. So here we go. Matthew chapter 7, starting from verse 1. Judge not that ye be not judged, for with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged, and with what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote from thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. And that last verse there's the introspection. Find your own log, sort out your own log first, and then go after the mote in your brother's eye. That's the introspection that Christ commands before you decide to go and judge anybody else. Now, it doesn't say it has to, that what is in your eye is identical to what is in your brother's eye. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because it has been said by Gman that you're only judging hypocritically if you're judging the sin of another while you are guilty of the exact same sin. No, that's not what it says. It's any sin. Until you're perfect, you don't judge anybody else. You don't tell them what they're doing wrong whilst you're doing anything wrong. When you are perfect like Christ, then and only then can you start to judge the faith of others. And when you announce that someone is not a Christian, you are judging their faith.
There is someone there who will judge. It is not up to you.
And like I say, the Bible says, you know, only God is the judge of who is and who is not saved. Gman is not God. I pointed this out to him the other day. He didn't like it.
No, but he keeps calling himself the church, which is even more disturbing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that Gman's not God, because I don't have faith in Gman. So there is the question of how can I think Jim was the one that was addressing how he was being treated in another live chat with the Calvinists as a Catholic, and someone said, how can you have your faith after, you know, being treated this way, Christians acting this way? And what did you say, Jim?
I said my faith isn't in them. It's in God. And it's actually funny you mentioned that, because today I found out that I was actually banned from that live chat.
You rattled their cage.
Oops.
Yeah, there's something to be said about somebody that's so afraid of what you're going to say, they're going to silence you. By the way, Gman is not banned from my live chat. And so if he comes in or one of his friends comes in, don't ban them or censor them. Let them talk. Don't censor them. Let's not be like him.
For that matter, if they get too far out of line, we might even have a special message prepared for them.
If MP wants to join, I can jettison out. I don't think I have a lot to add to this discussion.
But you have such a nice face.
He does, and he gets on camera.
Yeah.
You know, I can't help but there's a bit in the Bible that makes me chuckle, and of course, you know, it's in the King James Bible, which you think is the only proper Bible, despite its flaws. But the end of Mark has a bit in it. Now, bear in mind, not everybody realizes this, but Mark has had a whole chunk interposed on the end of it, just basically added to it. And we know this because of the, things that have been found in antiquity, such as the Codex Sinaiticus, which has all of the New Testament, most of the Old Testament, and it finishes with Mark 16:8. But in the end of the bit that's been added on, which again is in the King James Bible, which Gman so idolizes, of course, because you've seen him caress his Bible all the time. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name, they will cast out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up serpents in their hands. And if they drink any deadly poison, it won't hurt them. And they will lay their hands on the sick and they'll recover. So unless you've done all of those things, or any of those things, you're not a proper Christian. Now, of
You hear
course,
that, G-Man?
you know,
Real
I'm making a joke. But if I brought this up, he would just lose his mind about it, of course.
So you heard it here, Fundies. Real Christians can eat Tide Pods. Go.
Yeah.
Oh, don't tell him to eat Tide Pods. He probably will.
Try to prove that he's
I didn't
a Christian.
tell anybody
he
to
might.
eat Tide Pods. I said that they could eat Tide Pods.
G-Man, take it from an atheist. Eating Tide Pods is bad. You know he's going to do it. You just know he. Atheist
That's
said it must be wrong.
lies
Therefore, I
from
should
the
eat.
pit of hell.
Nom Tide Pod.
Hey, come on.
Okay. So anyway,
I have got another bit I'd like to read out, if nobody minds. And it's from John 8. It follows on from, in a way, from what I was saying. And I'll read it from verse 1. Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down, and with his finger wrote on the ground, as though he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. And that's yet another example of it not having to be the exact same sin.
So one of Gman's arguments, and one of the arguments that gets brought up against that, is that part of sin no more, that the transgression of homosexuality as a sin is especially egregious because it's committed in perpetuity, because it is seen as equivalent and as normal, as something which is to be accepted and recognized as part of society, even though it's a sin. And that's, from what I understand, to be the objection of that certain subset of Christians. And the only way I can kind of respond to that is, with the 7 deadly sins, there are the 7 heavenly virtues, right? And each one corresponds to it. And the virtues that correspond to wrath, envy, and pride are patience, kindness, and humility, where patience implies forgiveness and mercy, and wrath implies righteousness. And that's kind of those who put themselves on a pedestal of being the judge, of inflicting judgment and passing on judgment and taking judgment away from God, are kind of directly committing sins in perpetuity equally, right? Calling themselves judges by virtue of their own word.
You hear over and over this rhetoric that all sins are equal, yet this one they seem to hold apart from the others as being somehow more vile than the others, and that to me just doesn't really make sense. I mean, realistically, there are much greater sins in there that are referenced in terms of, you know, I mean, how many sins are there that be to Jesus telling somebody to hang a millstone around their neck and drown themselves in the sea. That's reserved for people that drive others away from the faith.
Can I maybe point something out here that I think we've missed? The Bible doesn't actually condemn. Sorry, my mouth isn't working. Condemn homosexuality. In that word doesn't appear in the Bible. If we go to Leviticus, which is the passage they usually use, but what is called an abomination is that a man lie with another man as with a woman. Now that is actually the act of homosexual sex.
Sodomy.
Not actually being homosexual.
Yeah.
There is a big difference there. You can be heterosexual and celibate, or heterosexual and sexually active, just like you can be homosexual and celibate.
Well, not only that,
homosexual and
sorry,
or homosexual and sexually active. Being homosexual does not mean you are sexually active, just as heterosexual doesn't mean you're sexually active. But what the Leviticus is saying is it's the act. That's been ignored completely. Utterly and completely.
It even gets further than that, too, because what's interesting, and General Han Solo and I've talked about this, that in Leviticus, it only addresses male.
Yes.
And there is
sodomy.
I want to point out that there is an obsession in Jewish culture and ancient Jewish culture about the seed of a male. And there's an obsession about procreating for the tribe of Israel. And so, like, if you look at it as an ancient people that are trying to replace...
Onan wasn't it?
We're not going to Onan. That's different. So if you look at an ancient people that is trying to put forth their generations and replace people they lost in war when they're in tribal warfare and to assert themselves as a nation, you're looking at some people that are very focused on lineage, very hyper-focused on lineage, in fact. So-and-so begot so-and-so, so-and-so begot so-and-so. It just goes on and on and on and on. And on top of it, they're looking at particularly procreating. You can hear my dog panting in the background. I apologize.
As I mentioned, that Bible study I did the other day, the first command that God really gave man was be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
This is one of the things that Drag was talking about earlier. He was playing a video from a couple of years ago with Phony Beatlemaniacs, who was starting to talk about the culture. And Gman doesn't understand the culture. He doesn't understand the surrounding stuff that goes with it. I'll give you an example. Is the first commandment out of the 10 Commandments is you shall have no other God than me. And of course, many people, many Christians have come to believe that that means that there's only one God. But that's not what the context is for that. The reality is that at the time, and the cultures around them, would believe in multiple gods. And so, each country, each tribe, the territory that they controlled, as you move from one country to another, you would pray to the local god to look after you, like paying your rates to the town mayor or something. And then you move to a different one, you pay your rates to that mayor or so on. And so the idea is that when, Moses comes down the mountain, finds him, praying to the golden calf, he gets annoyed and he's basically saying, look, we don't pray to the local gods anymore. We have one God that goes with us wherever we go. And that's the point of that commandment. But of course, Gman doesn't understand things like that because he doesn't understand it. I don't think he cares about the social context that goes around what the verses are talking about. He doesn't care about any of those things. He uses, give me a sec, he uses the Bible as a weapon to beat people with. That's what he does with the Bible. He, when he looks through the Bible, he's not looking at it for spiritual guidance or anything. He's looking, ironically, he would look at it almost in the way that I might. say, hang on, wait a minute, this makes no sense. I can use that to say that Christianity's silly. Well, he looks at it and say, oh, how can I find a bit that can make the atheist look stupid or insult the atheist or strawman the atheist, etc., etc.
I'm going to disagree. I think he spends more time trying to make other Christians look foolish.
Well, he doesn't see other Christians as proper Christians.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yay!
Jesus. Okay, so Cliff, since you finally stopped.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jade, you go ahead. God damn it, Cliff.
Damn it.
Jade?
Oh, well, by the way, I can't see the inside chat because I'm on my iPad. For some reason, my computer's just not working.
Can you hear us?
Jade?
Either. What the fuck is going on?
Jade,
yeah.
Hang on, give it a second.
You're cutting in and out.
Yeah, I know I am. I don't know why.
Yeah.
All right.
If you don't mind, so we don't have dead air here.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So to circle back around to what I was going to say is, Cliff, I don't think you're being entirely honest by saying that, oh, well, if we just take this piece of the text and just constrain it to the most obvious narrow application that would have been the most topical for that time, sure, it's easy to write a lot of this stuff off, but I believe there's more of a spirit to that. You shall have no other gods. There's more spirit to that than there is just the brute fact of other gods were worshipped in a time and you're not going to worship them. Like I don't think that's I don't think you're presenting a fair interpretation of that text.
It comes across as being a little dismissive.
Well,
I'm really only explaining about the context of the, obviously they believe in the God and what the God brings to them and the spirituality that goes with it. I'm not talking about that. That comes with it, but that's the God that they follow. And like I say, they're wandering around the desert. That's the reason why the golden calf thing is relevant or is now being
the history. I gotta stop for a second. The history of that is a lot to do with idol smashing, right? So if there's a gentleman here who is Jewish named Idol Smasher, or actually Noahide in particular, and what he's referencing is a story in the Tanakh where it's not in the canon of the Bible, but it's in the Tanakh, and this is a story of Abraham. Abraham's father, I think, was an idol maker. And then he smashes all the idols and says, this, there is one God. And he is one of the first. He is the father of Judaism. He's Father Abraham, had many sons had Father Abraham. And he's the start of moving out of polytheism to monotheism, saying, guys, remember, there is one God, the same God that created you. There's one. There's not many, there's one. And so to be fair, it does kind of tie in a little bit together. But moving on, that is not the subject that we came for.
Yeah.
And if I can take like 4 steps back, I'd like to touch on something you were talking about a few moments ago, which is how obsessed the Judaic culture was with reproduction. And it was more along the lines of growing their tribe. And this isn't just seen with the prohibitions. You have, and I mentioned it very briefly earlier, the story of Onan, and that his actual sin was not performing his duty and making sure that his brother's wife ended up bearing a child to continue the lineage. I mean, it was all about continuing that lineage, continuing the tribe. To that point, when you get to things that might be seeming to go off topic, but follow me for one moment on this, when you even get to their laws pertaining to slavery, the non-Hebrew slaves were actually allowed to become members of the tribe over time. It was all about increasing the size of their tribe, whether it be through reproduction or introducing those from other cultures or what have you. This was a primary focus. This is why it'd be a problem for a man to lie with a man, because there can be no children to come forth from that. It was all about reproduction. Now you move that forward to time where you have Jesus who said that he was not there to abolish the law, but to bring it forward in time. You then have a different understanding. The tribe had grown. The tribe was strong. The tribe no longer needed as many of these prohibitions, but the old prohibitions weren't ever revised. They were never looked back at. And it could be said that the new covenant was in fact, or in effect, to do this. To say, okay, we don't need those laws anymore. We have progressed. Now this is the way things are.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because there's a consensus among a lot of Christian scholars on the Catholic and Protestant side that like the dietary and ritual washing laws that came with the Old Testament helped preserve the Hebrew population in terms of health and welfare. So I think that it's just a little anecdote. I think that adds some credence to your argument.
This isn't something that I just pulled out, unfortunately. This is something that I've been toying with for a bit of a while, because if you look at a lot of the things that have been left by the wayside, including most of the temple laws and what have you, this is part of progress. And it shows that, well, even if you're going to say that these laws are passed down by God and there was a reason behind them, some of those reasons are no longer there. We've moved past the need for some of those reasons.
Now, many Christians argue that homosexuality usurps God's creation, that God wouldn't allow somebody to have a inclination for it or a disposition naturally for that it would be part of lust or a choice. Oh, you hear the word choice get thrown out a lot. But I want to point out that Jesus even refers to some being born that way. And what he's saying is, he says that on Matthew 19:10, I believe 10 through 12, he talks about the eunuchs. And he mentions it in such a way that there are some that are born eunuchs. Now, eunuchs in the ancient world didn't always just mean somebody that was missing their testicles. It meant also people that were perhaps effeminate or homosexual. It was actually a catch-all word, somebody that could not procreate. So it's interesting that Jesus gives a nod to somebody that can't procreate in a hypersensitive, tribalistic, we need to assert ourselves as a nation. And yet Jesus does a shout out to those that are born that way. So I think that's interesting.
Well, not only that, I mean, it would effectively make God a trickster God to make people like that, knowing how they would feel and so on. It just, okay, so Gman can't have it both way. He can't say that these people are living in sin and that kind of thing, but God made them that in the first place, But then again, he probably wouldn't. He would probably say they choose to do it. And of course, then you ask him to, okay, choose to be gay then. And then he'll do it.
Cliff, from that point, didn't God make us all able to sin and prone to sin?
Well, I have my own argument on that, and that would be attacking Christianity. I don't want to do that here.
Fair enough.
What were the verses again, Holy?
Hang on.
I have them here. I just want to know what the numbers.
Matthew 19.
Sorry?
The eunuch that I have here is Acts 8:26-40.
No. I'm asking Holy for the one she's talking about.
These are the words of Jesus. It's in Matthew 19. It says 19:11, verse 11. It says, "For the eunuchs have been from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven," meaning maybe being celibate. "Let anyone accept this who can." Matthew 19:11 through 12.
12.
That wasn't on my
Through to
list.
12. That's what I was asking for. Thank you.
And then there's
that
the
one
children
wasn't on my
counseling thing as well, isn't there? That follows after.
But yeah, once again, this goes back to the whole thing of procreation being so important when the tribe was small. And at this point in time, even in Jesus' own time, he's citing that we can move beyond that.
Right. And Jesus didn't seem to feel a need to cure the eunuch. Why is that? If Jesus can heal and put a man's, if this is indeed a man with crushed testicles, or by choice or not choice, right? And that's all this eunuch is, like the traditional usage of the word eunuch, which, by the way, is not the word that is used in Hebrew. But if that is simply what it is, how come Jesus doesn't heal the guy's balls?
I don't know. Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
You're crackly, but yes.
Because
Oh,
Peter,
finally.
that would imply laying on hands.
Yeah, that'd be testifying. What's your point?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that whole thing too, there was swearing by grabbing onto the testicles in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
That's kind of what testify was referencing, if I recall. But
Yep.
yeah, there's. Sorry, go ahead. I'll step back.
But they used to say no homo when they did it.
I'm sure they did, but keep in mind that in accordance to biblical law, if somebody's had their testicles crushed, they weren't allowed among the congregation. So, yeah, that further reinforces.
I wanted to go back to something that had actually been brought up that we've just sailed straight over, which was saying that this was a choice. And there's more and more evidence coming out that it's a combination of genetic and environmental factors while you're in the womb, and that it is not a choice. And I have to ask those who think it is a choice, especially Gman. Gman, when did you choose to be straight? When did you make that choice?
Well, I think the counter argument would be that humans are by default made straight, and that somebody with same-sex attraction chooses to deviate from that.
Well, that would
for
actually
whatever purposes.
Yeah, well, that would mean that that this was a willing choice, and yet we know it isn't. How many people have wanted to be straight, but they are not? How many people have gone through mental torture because they want to be straight and they're not?
Oh yeah, I mean, look at Andy Warhol, right?
So
Devout Catholic.
There is absolutely, I don't think there is any evidence at all that it's a choice. I don't think there is any evidence. And there is evidence contrary to that position. So again, I will ask Gman, when did you choose to be straight?
I really would like to come off of that real quick and just say, if you don't mind, story time. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you a story why I'm convinced of my position, and maybe it'll help. So I might be Southern Californian, but I was born in the South. I was adopted. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and I was raised in a very kind of strange situation. But one of the situations I was raised in was I was extremely indoctrinated, extremely segregated. I didn't have any friends growing up, and I was homeschooled. And I was not allowed to watch TV a lot of times. Like I got to watch Mr. Rogers when I was a little kid, and then some Nickelodeon here and there. But for the most part, I got to watch old movies. Oh man, I know old movies very well, but nothing too much recent. Smurfs was bad and evil. I wasn't allowed to watch Smurfs. I don't know. It was crazy. But anyway, that being said, I am convinced, by the way I was raised and the vacuum I was in, that when I hit 13 and I was at church and people were like, "This person's cute," and I was like, sure, okay. Whatever. And I found that I sometimes was more attracted to my girlfriends than my guy friends. I knew then that there was something that was a little bit different. So I would identify as bisexual. I love my husband, and I'm attracted to him, but I'm more often attracted to the same sex as well. I found that out as a kid. So you can be raised in a bubble, and as a homeschooler and not allowed to watch anything, and you will still end up with same-sex attraction. It happens.
You're attracted to who you're attracted to. It's as simple as that.
And nowhere did I want to choose that. I hated myself for that. I was afraid of that. I was scared of that. I would deny that. I would joke about it. I was terrified. Honestly, I did more. I did better with my mental health when I finally came to terms with it and said, "Oh, this is a thing. This is part of my orientation, and it is what it is, and I don't hate myself for it." But I am required by some Christians to hate myself and to condemn other people. It's a requirement for some of these people.
Which I think is strange, seeing as God, Jesus, etc. The whole core of the message is love.
Yeah.
Of course, then you get hate to sin, love the sinner, and all this weird stuff that I find a little bit, well, frankly, unchristian and hypocritical. But the thing is, people are going to be attracted to who they're attracted to. Now, there's a couple, as far as I'm concerned, theological approaches to this that are somewhat more solid. One of which would be to say that this is what God has saddled you with. This is the temptation that he has set for you to struggle with over the course of your life, is one approach. And the other is simply, God is love. So clearly when he's in these verses that they're using to try to condemn homosexuality, they're simply misunderstanding that if God made you this way, this is how God intends you to love.
Yes, but as a Catholic, you also don't have to justify yourself to anybody. The Catholic Church, especially lately with Pope Francis and many of the higher ups in the church, have kind of, they didn't say homosexuality is okay. It's just that it's not to be condemned.
The question there is, if God made you this way, obviously he had some reason for it.
Yeah,
God's plan.
Well, to put a little bit more nuance on the Catholic position, right? I do like where the Holy Father is coming from on this position. Whereas they will still require you to come into the confessional should you commit a same-sex act. But at the same time, his phrase, who am I to judge, was in reference to a hypothetical clergyman who had same-sex attraction, lives celibate, and makes every effort to honor God in his life. Well, who am I to judge?
God damn it.
Right?
And that story actually brings us back to the story of the eunuch that was referenced earlier, that, here's a eunuch and he should be baptized. Sorry, the eunuch reference that I put up earlier, that was eunuch asking why he shouldn't be baptized. This was an Acts. And he was permitted to be baptized anyway, because that's simply who he is. That's okay, basically. That this should not be a reason to ban them from the congregation.
If I could just remind everybody of the passage I read out of the adulteress, when at the end of it Christ said, "Then neither do I condemn you." So why are we expected to be making videos to condemn homosexuality if Christ said that he didn't condemn that sinner?
Well, Gman's not a Christian, though, is he? He's a Paulian as well as a Pauling. I know Christians don't want to say that kind of thing, but, he doesn't act as a Christian, as Jesus taught.
Well,
what would Jesus do?
I think you have to, you've got to cut a bit of slack, because none of us would say we were good enough. But there are good Christians, mediocre Christians, and bad Christians.
Yeah, but not being good enough does not mean you get to say, "Oh well, fuck it, then I can just do whatever the fuck I want because I can't."
No, that's not the point I was making.
I don't think I've ever met a person who made themselves the arbiter of who is or is not of the faith that wasn't doing so for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that it's for self-validation.
Holier than thou?
Yep.
Fair enough.
There we go.
That's what we're doing in this hangout.
And then I could assume, it's been my experience that those who are very focused and hyper-focused on homosexuality are either homosexual and they hate themselves, and they're doing the whole Javert thing from Les Miserables, you know, that they hate where they come from. Yeah, Javert hates Jean Valjean because he himself was born in a prison. He hates where he comes from, so therefore he hates, you know, the wicked, you know, criminal. And so there's either that or I like to say that there's some people that are heterosexual that maybe are involved in heterosexual sins, pornography, fornication, lust, things like that, that like to throw a rock in a different direction and go, look over there, at least I'm not gay.
Yeah.
I find it quite telling that the demographic that is most opposed to homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and things like that is also the demographic with the highest divorce rate in the U.S. Southern Baptists.
Yeah.
I need to ask a question because I'm not. I don't know where this started. What did something precede this? Did Jade tell Gman off in the comments or something like that? And you know, it's like, oh, I need to attack her now.
No, he's been attacking her for a while now.
Yeah, but this is new. This is new, and it seems to be. Oh well, if Dragnot's attacking me, I'm going to attack your pal Jade.
Right.
That seems to be it.
And it was funny because he seemed to want to just attack someone, so I then threw myself out there to be a target. Kind of like, okay, if you want to attack somebody, come at me. I'm ready for this. I'm waiting for this. I've been wanting this.
That's exactly why I invited him on my channel.
Which, by the way, Gman, I challenge you not to post out and talk to Jim on his channel.
I challenge him because
Gman?
of one of my videos from the last few days. Crimes.
Yeah, G-Man, are you afraid of Catholics? That's probably it.
Well, he's afraid of me. He doesn't want to come and have a conversation with me. Last time we talked about it was on TST, and I needed to admit that I was wrong about, you know, something that I believe to be the case in the Bible.
Forget you. He's afraid of anabolic atheists, and they don't even exist.
Yeah, that's true. Well, atheists don't exist according to him. But I think
Depends on what way the wind's blowing.
I do think though that we're watching someone who is running around throwing out all these accusations against people who can't even be bothered to get his facts straight. Certainly when it came to Jade and calling her out as a practicing homosexual, even though he'd been told otherwise, he still kept saying it. And it demonstrates why he is in no position to judge anybody, because he makes mistakes. He makes such simple mistakes, and based on those mistakes, he tries to cast them out of the church. They're not real Christians. Well, I think we're seeing why it's really important that as humans, we don't try and judge the faith of another, because you can't know the mind or the heart or the soul of another person. If you're a Christian, then you believe that only God can do that. And G-Man ain't God.
Yep.
G-Man can't know my mind or my heart or my soul. He can't know how strongly I believe something or how weakly I believe it. But God can. God will make the judgment. God will make the judgment, not G-Man.
It goes right back to what I mentioned earlier about the Proverbs 6:19, which is abominations, sowing discord amongst brothers or believers.
But there's another point. If homosexuality is sin by Christian standards or by some Christian standards, why would there be a law prohibiting gay marriage for atheists who have no such compunction?
Actually, the whole gay marriage thing, I used to have a pseudo-apologetic for that, which is what would happen if it was simply condemned because gays at the time weren't able to get married. And what made it a sin was the fact that since they couldn't get married, it was going to have to be extramarital sex. So shouldn't we allow them to get married so that we're not forcing them to sin?
Oh, I like that.
It runs a bit deeper that with the Catholic theology, but that's kind of neither here nor there.
Can I also bring up something else? Seen as the favourite passage is from Leviticus, and that Jade is supposed to repent, and I mean, as far as Gman is concerned, stop being homosexual. I think. Because he's not getting this celibate business. But another abomination is the wearing of mixed fibres. Yet Gman was wearing his mixed fibres tonight.
I don't know. I just feel the sudden need to point out my favorite verse: "Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, so saith the preacher."
I love Ecclesiastes.
What I was trying to point out was that with this idea of repent and not do it again, is Gman repented of his mixed fabrics and not doing it again? If he wants to use Leviticus
as a weapon
to preach to Jade about this, then why is he not holding himself to the same standard? He's holding himself to a different standard.
Yes, he's holding himself to a different covenant.
He's saved because he has been ordained by Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah.
No.
Well, that's what I think he believes, right? I think that there's people on the internet that really have the gall to think that what they say is verbatim, like they are a prophet that has a hotline to God. Yeah. But really, they have the same view as everybody else. Like, it's not like, yes, there's like the Holy Spirit and there's leading and there's your conscience and stuff like that. But literally, I think Gman woke up one day, had an epiphany and said, I need to generate some views. I want to strike at Fiona and drag at the same time. And I don't really like homosexuals, so let's go pick on Jade.
Well, actually, I think he likes me, and that's part of the problem.
Might be.
But the thing is, this one-man ministry or two-people ministry thing is something that's really strange to me. Because I'm used to being around people with extensive educations. Priests spend years studying for the priesthood. The nuns I was taught by all had, master's degrees at least. So one of my favorite nuns had 3 master's degrees: theology, biology, and literature, English literature. I'm used to people who can really talk about these things, who know who Aristotle is, and who know who Thomas Aquinas is, and the relationship between Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, and who Plato is, and who St. Augustine is, and the relationship between those two, and so on and so forth. I'm used to people who studied Latin and Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic, and have spent years in study. So how these people think they can pick up the King James Bible, because that's usually what it is, read it in its English, not in its original language, in its English, and then suddenly decide that they are appointed by God to tell everybody else what they're doing wrong.
Ecclesiastes again.
Yeah. Could I also just mention one thing? It goes back to what Holy Spackle said about really thinking they're appointed by God and the Holy Spirit speaking through them and all the rest of it. On Monday, when Gman made his video first having a go at Jade, Monday, remember, he whiffled on for quite some time and then declared that they would all be talking about this tonight on Talking Shit Tuesday.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah, you would think God would know it was Monday and not Tuesday if it was God speaking through him. And that ridiculously daft, tiny error, which would be irrelevant. We all forget the days of the week now and again. But why would God get it wrong if God was speaking through him? Is he sure it's God that's telling him to do this?
No, but that same reasoning was used to justify the Inquisition. I think it was Torquemada who used that justification of, well, if these people were innocent and weren't guilty of the sins that I'm punishing them for, why would God put these thoughts into my head? Since I think these thoughts about them, they must be guilty.
Yeah, but that would then give you the, well, if I am right about this, why did I get the day of the week wrong?
Yeah.
Never once have I heard any of them question who it is they think is talking to them.
Look, I just have to throw this in here. Someone once asked Cardinal Gibbons. Cardinal Gibbons was a very well-known cardinal in the Catholic Church. Asked Cardinal Gibbons if he thought the Pope was infallible. And Gibbons said, well, I don't know. Every time he talks to me, he calls me Gibbons.
Well, by the doctrine of papal infallibility, his name is Gibbons.
Well, of course, papal infallibility it's a very narrow thing which people don't understand. But the thing is, anybody representing religion, whatever religion it is, are still human beings, and they're still fallible, and they're going to make mistakes. So why some low-rent Elmer Gantry here on the internet, if you don't understand that reference, find the book and read it, thinks that somehow they have all the answers. Excuse me, that scholars and theologians have struggled for centuries to understand, because, I don't know, maybe they're hearing voices in their heads. Just astonishes me.
That's another quick note to the chat. Yes, I believe Jade's aware that she's breaking up a little bit. We're just doing the best we can at this point because her connection's a little crap.
Yeah, I'm just having problems today. That's all there is. Yeah.
Being that Jade is one of the main people in question, we're going to endure through the crackle. We do apologize and don't mind our dust.
And besides, we simply love Jade and we'll let her get away with everything.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I think something that we do need to touch on, given that it's been declared that Jade isn't a Christian, is that we have to look at what is a Christian.
Yep. That's what I mentioned too. I agree.
Yeah. And we've got the creed, which goes over the basic, the fundamental beliefs that you hold to be a Christian. And then we've got the teachings of Christ himself. And what we are supposed to be doing as followers of Christ. And I mean, that takes us to, I would say, Matthew 25 and the judging of the nations. The passage about feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, etc. And that's what we should be doing. I'm not seeing anywhere where it says that at any point we are supposed to judge anyone. That's not something that I see anywhere. But what I do see is what I can't even remember where it is now. When Christ says, "Why call ye me Lord, Lord, yet not do what I tell you?" And to me, that means you can call him Lord, Lord until you're blue in the face. But if you're ignoring his teachings, then that means nothing. Because he isn't actually your Lord. You're paying lip service. If he's truly your Lord, you will do as he taught you to do. And when he was asked what the most important commandment was, what we should all be doing is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's what he's teaching us to do as a follower of Christ. And there's nothing at what.
Would you be so kind to read out the Nicene Creed? Because I think you say it very well.
The whole creed?
Yeah, it's not too long.
Okay, let me just pull it up.
It's not that long.
No, wasn't it Constantine?
Constantine.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I'm just looking this up.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there about the Council of Nice and Nicene Creed and Constantine's role in it.
Yeah.
At the time, the church had a huge controversy in it, and it was very difficult to determine what actual Christian doctrine was. So after a while, when Constantine had declared tolerance for Christianity in the empire, he convinced the church to convene the council so that they could address the problems and hammer out some definitive beliefs so that people knew what was what.
I'm pulling this up because I do not want to get a single word wrong in this. Well, you know what it's like. Get a single word wrong. And
I know.
Okay, so this is it. And I'm pulling this from the Vatican website. But this creed, if you can check it out on Wiki, and you can pull up all the different versions of it that different churches use, Methodist, Lutheran, whatever. So here we go. These are the basic beliefs of the Christian faith. We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all that is, seen and unseen. We believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the only Son of God, eternally begotten of the Father, God from God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten, not made, one in being with the Father. Through him all things were made. For us men and for our salvation he came down from heaven. By the power of the Holy Spirit he was born of the Virgin Mary and became man. For our sake he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered death and was buried. On the third day he rose again with the scriptures. He ascended into heaven and is the Father. He will come against the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. We believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from with the Father, and glorified. He has spoken through the prophets. We believe in one holy apostolic church. We acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins, of the dead, and the life. And can I just point out that Catholic has a small c, not a capital C. So that when it says we believe in one holy Catholic and apostolic church, the meaning of that word is universal. And that's because Paul, the evangelist, had taken the Christian faith out into the Gentiles.
Yeah, it's an ecumenical language, isn't it?
So Bella was writing along with you. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
So that is why the word Catholic with a small c is in there. So if anybody tries to claim that that creed states that it's only the Roman Catholic Church, no, that's not what it's saying. Small c, it means universal. As in to the Jews and also to the Gentiles.
You can also make an argument, though, for the large C and still extend it to the rest of the church at large. Because the church holds that any Christian denomination with a valid baptism is part of the true faith.
Well, I wouldn't bother trying to make an argument for the capital C because it's written with a small c and not a capital C.
Yeah,
so
I'm just saying
the point of making an argument for a capital C. Unless you take it up in the Vatican.
The church.
Right.
And not only that, it's an opportunity for people to just ignore everything that was said about, what the beliefs are and focus on one word in order to say, oh, that's not true and you're heretics, etc., etc., etc.
So we could even paraphrase this.
You mean God?
And if I go to carm.org, which is Matt Slick, who is a fundamental Calvinist. Even if carm.org does have the primary essentials, which is basically the creed. It acknowledges the deity of Christ and gives a verse. It acknowledges Jesus to be in flesh. It acknowledges salvation is by grace. It acknowledges the resurrection of Christ. It acknowledges the gospel. It acknowledges monotheism.
I always like to ask Carm, where is that list of essentials in the Bible?
It's a rewording of. It's honestly the rewording of the creed, and we just don't want to call it that.
I know, but it's always fun.
So that's the essentials of the Christian doctrine.
Oh, but if we're reading from the Bible, can I do some? Sorry.
So if Jade is holding to all of that, then where is Gman getting this? She is not a Christian. Because he thinks she sins.
Well,
if we want to go down that road, has Gman never sinned? Is Gman not still a sinner? Because according to him in his favourite verse, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Apart from Gman, of course.
And we can see Gman sins all the damn time.
Well, he has to sleep sometimes.
You know, have you ever noticed when Jesus gets harsh, who he's harsh towards?
Pharisees.
He's harsh towards the very religious, those that think that they're better than everybody else.
The ones that tell everybody, do as I say and not as I do. The ones who stand and pray loudly in the street for everyone to see how holy they are. The noisy ones, instead of going quietly into their little prayer closet and quietly praying to God. That's the ones that Jesus saved his harshest words for, the hypocrites.
And another point where Jesus comes down the hardest, if you ever listen to Ramcam or Gman, they'll talk about sheeps and goats a lot, and God's going to separate the sheep from the goats. And so, like, there's been accusations that I'm a goat, that Fiona's a goat, that Jade's a goat, that Jim here's a goat. People that like say, hey, I'm a Christian, I profess to be a Christian, but they're not actually a Christian. But when I look at Matthew 25 and what a goat actually is, it's very interesting. It looks a little bit different than you would think.
I've got it pulled up here if you want me to read it.
Yeah, go ahead and read the sheeps and the goats. You're really good at it.
Okay. Right.
I think it starts on 31.
31. It starts on 30. Here we go. Okay. The sheep and the goats. Meh. It includes llamas.
Wait, let me get the goat.
Yeah,
okay.
get the goat.
Oh, wait, we gotta do the goat.
Okay, we gotta get the goat. Here we go.
Matthew
Get fully goat in here.
Matthew 25.
Hold on, Fiona. Cliff, where's your goat?
I don't know. Someone might have it.
He keeps losing it.
Oh.
Somebody keeps getting it.
Somebody might have it.
Right, here we go, people.
Okay.
Matthew 25, starting at verse 31.
Sheeple.
When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And before him shall be gathered all the nations, and he shall separate them one from the other, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Then he shall say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was an hungered, and ye gave me no meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me not in. Naked, and ye clothed me not. Sick, and in prison, and ye visited me not. Then shall they also answer him, saying, Lord, when saw we thee an hungered, or athirst, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not minister unto thee? Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye did it not to one of the least of these, ye did it not to me. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. And
Yeah,
that
but that's not salvation, it's a false gospel.
Well, bouncing back a little bit to the topic here, I'm going to ask if you all wouldn't mind indulging me for a moment. Red?
Sure.
Hang on 1 second here, please, if you would.
Just let me know when you're ready. I'll continue with this real quick. I just wanted to say that Jesus is harshest with the with those that don't do the quote unquote social gospel, as people like to attack the Methodists for, but basically Christian humanism. It's to treat people as you would yourself, the golden rule, and to care for people, to feed them, to look out for each other. Those people that profess that they know the Lord and can't do that, they're the ones that are cast out. So it's not the homosexuals or the I don't know who else you want to pick on, particularly the liberals from California, but it is those that neglect to heed Christ's words, and those words are pretty stern sounding. Shadow, go ahead.
Okay, I am reading Foreshadow from 1 John chapter 4. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, but every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. We are from God, and whoever knows God listens to us, but whoever is not from God does not listen to us. This is how we recognize the spirit of truth and the spirit of falsehood. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God, and everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed us his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. This is how we know we live in him and he in us. He has given us his Spirit. And we have seen and testified that the Father has sent his Son to be the Savior of the world. If anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in them and they in God. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. In this world, we are like Jesus. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. We love because he first loved us. Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. And he has given us this command: anyone who loves God must also love their brother and sister.
So I hope we've addressed what maybe a Christian could look like. Maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's my little map pin for where the trajectory should end in terms of what is and isn't Christian. Because it comes down to simply loving your neighbor, loving one another, loving God, etc. Now, minus loving God in my case, I suppose. But at the same point, love my wife. I love my kids. I love all these people. And if somebody loves somebody of the same gender, well, that's loving God in a way as well and loving one another. And that kind of fits this, doesn't it?
Could I just take it slightly outside of that? And it's me and my Good Samaritan rant, except it's not quite a rant. But we've talked about loving neighbours, etc. So then we then have to ask that question, who is our neighbour? And that's the question that Christ was asked. And in response, he told the parable of the Good Samaritan. So the poor guy has been robbed and beaten and he's lying in a ditch. And two Jews walk past him and have nothing to do with him. And this guy is Jewish. And then along comes a Samaritan. And at the time that the parable is told, the Samaritans and the Jews each considered the other to be heretical. They were not worshipping God correctly. Heretics, idolaters, all the rest of it. They weren't part of the faith system. But Jesus chose to make the Samaritan the hero of the story. Why are we watching Max eat?
Great. Now we're going to create another sock account called Max Eats.
Yeah, so Jesus actually chose to make the Samaritan the hero of the story. And he was telling this story as a Jew to other Jews. So he's picked the one that they would hate the most, makes him the hero of the story. And the Samaritan stops, goes to the Jew in the ditch, binds his wounds up, puts him on the donkey, takes him to the inn, pays the innkeeper to take care of him. And then Jesus asks him, who was the neighbour? And even although the bad blood between the Jews and the Samaritans, they answered him and said, it was the Samaritan that was his neighbour. That's who you're supposed to be loving. Not just those in your own wee clique.
I like the way our blessed Lord ended that parable with the statement, now go and do this, go and do likewise.
Yes.
I'm sorry to derail for a quick moment. I want to briefly respond to something that's out in the chat. Yes, my wife is indeed Christian. No, Gman hasn't deconverted her. But at the same point, she has banned his voice even from our household because she finds him to be such a poor representation of Christianity. She just doesn't even want to hear his voice in here because he kind of his presentation kind of flies in the face of Christianity as she knows it.
Personally, I find him to be poor representation of humanity.
Although I think he might be above average for someone who's from New Jersey.
Oh gosh.
That's fair.
I do want to petition Trump to not build a wall around our country, but please build a wall around New Jersey. Christopher Mowdy is an exception, and he's out in New Jersey, but most of New Jersey we can build a wall from. We'll just lose Gman and Darwin's deity.
And we have to make Chris Christie pay for it.
No, don't take Darwin's deity from me.
Nope, he's going in the wall.
Don't even go there.
Oh well.
Do you really think he won't be right on the other side of that wall, yelling and screaming? You'll have plenty of them still.
I've got a good friend who lives in Jersey City, funnily enough, and is nothing like Gman and is a Christian.
Yeah.
And I suppose, in a way, we also have to address this another issue, which is if you're not using your YouTube channel to be preaching and doing videos about your faith all the time, then somehow you're not a proper Christian, because that's all YouTube is for. That and cat videos.
Oh hell! You look at my main channel. I mean, half the videos on there are religious in nature, and I still get called an atheist.
Yeah, because you're not doing it the same way. as Gman wants you to do it.
It's no true Scotsman fallacy, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw you being called an atheist in that thread. And that's sad.
Yeah, well.
That's the go-to every single time. If anybody disagrees with anything he has done, he just immediately calls him an atheist. If they say they're a Christian, he will just say, but yeah, but you're not a real Christian. And that's it. And he doesn't need to take correction from you, because just by definition, if you're going to correct him, you're not a Christian.
But not only that,
it's never occurred to him that there's any fault in him.
But added on to that is, you know, he will then say, atheists don't exist. You all know God exists. You're just, withholding the truth in your unrighteousness. Yes. You know, and it's like, oh, so wait a minute. So Catholics are atheists, but atheists don't exist. They all believe. Something's wrong with your logic here, G-Man.
You use G-Man and logic in the same sentence. You owe us all an apology.
But I mean, can I just say? I mean, I don't hate G-Man. I really don't hate G-Man.
Oh, me neither.
And I have tried and tried and tried to get people who he may listen to speak to him, and they are not interested. They're really not interested. Or they'll say, we'll do it in private.
You're also not the only one that's attempted that. Years ago, back when I used to actually go into Gman Hangouts, I was trying to help him learn apologetics and frankly become a little bit less ignorant, and I was trying to help him a little bit there. And of course, it got to the point that I just had enough, and I started reaching out to Christians in the community and encouraging them to surround him and try and help him learn the doctrine of the church and what it is to be, well, Christ-like, frankly. And some of them rejected the notion immediately. Others attempted to help, but at the same point, he just basically turned away, as far as I'm concerned, from anything having to do with Christ, and instead just made himself his own church.
Funnily enough, I asked Sabella today in the side chat, what was it that G-Man turned on you about? And she said that she tried to help him come up with good arguments against the Black Hebrew Israelites, and that basically she just didn't like. So he didn't like the fact she was trying to educate him. Possibly a woman shouldn't be able to preach or educate or teach the church, that kind of thing. Like,
women can't teach, right? Like that's there is, and someone can. I challenge G-Man to somehow make this viewable again. But there is a hangout called G-Man versus the World, and it's number 33, and I got into it with G-Man about slavery and also child abuse. And he thinks a father's role is to instill fear upon his kid and we'll just wait till dad gets home and hit him. And in that video, you'll see that, and you'll see him defending slavery in a way that I think is just disturbing, especially for a black man.
Well, he's not wrong. You do beat the kids.
You do beat the kids hard. So we got in an argument that hangout is missing. And I think that's interesting. He booted me, and hang on, Scott's phone's going off. By the way, that's not copyrighted. So
have you got a date for it?
It was well, see, we got booted. It was me that got booted first, and I was screamed at saying this is why women can't preach and talk in church. And I was giving the same argument that Gambler is actually argued for, because Gambler talked to me afterwards. And then Han had some similar arguments as well, and he was booted soon after. So we went in a hangout. So if there's a G-Man slavery hangout on the Holy Spackle channel, and I do link to that original hangout hangout's missing. It's not there anymore. Like, we can't get a hold of it. My hangout's there with the response of Han and I talking about it and kind of debriefing after we get kicked out. And I want to say that was in March of 2016, and it's Gman versus the World 33. I shared the link. It's disappeared. We can find 32, but there's no
32 yet.
No, there's no 33.
I don't know. He's done at least 33 of those and converted nobody yet. When I did Fundy Fox Against the World, there were like 3 or 4 people that were wanting to convert to Foxitarianism. Bad joke. Had to do it.
So, Gman, why don't you show that? Why are you hiding that one?
All the other ones are coming up. I've done a specific search for that one.
Yeah,
I'm
33
not getting it.
missing.
Possibly for the same reason True Prism hides his hangouts.
Let's just try this. Nope.
Oh, Sabella added on the end, sent him an entire PDF of arguments he could use against the Black Hebrew Israelites. He completely ignored it. I even called him in a live show so everyone would know that I sent it to him.
So, Gman, this hangout is going to go in another direction in a minute, which is basically, I'm letting you know, I'm giving you a warning that I won't lay down and let you beat people in the face. If you insist on making your goal to expose others, I will hold up a mirror if that's what you want, because I have a lot of content, and so does Jim, and so does Drag. We have so much that if you really want to throw rocks, you're a glass house. You're a glass house, and I'd rather not. I don't want to throw rocks, but if you're going to force us to, I can
threw
just
them back for about a week. Now, granted, I started it by citing my son. Now, what amazed me was how he made that video on his little bitty channel to try and respond to me, to kind of effectively bury it. And the simple fact of the matter is, this is something I've been referencing for years now. This is not something new.
Sorry, Spackle, what year was that, did you say?
2016, I think she said.
2016, she said.
Yeah, 2016.
Right.
Yeah, I think my hangout's called "Bite the Bullet" and
Yeah, I
accept
found that one.
slavery. Han and I were kind of dumbfounded by the whole thing.
Well, even when when Max was going to be doing his hangout talking about the Bible and slavery, and I helped him prep for that, I told him that the first thing he needs to do really is to acknowledge that slavery is wrong, and then you have to explore why might God have allowed it during that time period. Because, I mean, you can't sit there and say that this was good without, well, why would it be allowed is the question, not what would make it good. Ugh. Sorry, the fact that he tries to defend that amazes me.
It's horrific. Like, it's him
Wait,
and
me or
Uncle
Gman?
our Uncle Tom. It's insane.
But yeah,
Wait,
that's somewhat on a side. No, I mean him trying to defend it. I get why you're being a contrarian, going after one of the harder arguments. I respect you for that. But at the same point, you were willing to admit that slavery in and of itself is just freaking wrong, and he won't even do that.
Oh yeah, that's suicide.
Well.
So,
I just want to add one more thing that popped into my head just now. You know where Gman has sort of preached this idea that thought crime effectively, because Jade's guilty of thought crime, despite because he's described as being a practicing homosexual despite being told that she's not practicing, but she's still wrong. She's still doing sin.
Sin was not condemning people for being gay in his last one. That was the weird part. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point I'm just trying to make is when we've heard him say that if you look at a woman with lust, you've already committed adultery in your heart, kind of thing. Well, Gman has some scientists asked asked to meet, if he'd be interested in meeting when he went to New York, and Gman didn't turn up, but did prance around with a machete, which effectively means that using that thought crime thing, that he wanted to murder or attempted murder or attack Sam the Scientist in his heart, because thinking about it is what matters, right?
That's
Can I just check something? Can I check something with Deidre, please?
Is lusting
Please,
after
please,
Is it-
hang on. Please do.
Yeah. Is it called Faithful the Fruit Inspector Gets Owned?
Maybe.
I've got it.
It might be that one, but I thought it was Gman versus the World number 33.
It says Gman versus the World 33. Faithful the Fruit Inspector Gets Owned.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, I've got it.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check it out sometime, and then if you have it, we'll talk later. Okay. Okay.
He'll be mirroring or something out there privately.
Yeah, there'll be something for that one, because that one was a gem. So again, if you hold a mirror and you want to throw rocks at people that honestly act like kinder people and follow the golden rule, seemingly mostly, if you want to throw rocks at these people, I'm more than happy to throw up a mirror. Look at yourself.
Oh, keeping in mind, if you're looking at yourself in a mirror and you start throwing rocks, all you break is you.
No, all you break is the mirror.
Oh, hush. I like my metaphor. Leave me alone.
That's one of the things that Skylar Fiction's kind of interesting, because he actually doesn't take people that much out of context. Like, he abbreviates it, but for the most part, he really just captures what people say. He does hold up a mirror.
I mean, the thing is, there needs to be a certain level of introspection, and I think it's hard to judge oneself enough when you're doing that introspection. The problem is when you start judging others without doing that introspection, then it's just empty. There's nothing to it. It's just, okay, you haven't even looked at your own behavior first. What's the point of you looking at others instead of looking at yourself first?
I want to say something real quick. And Sabella's out there, and I want to say something that when I first met Sabella, we clashed pretty hard. And I can't remember. I was in a hangout with Ran and her, and I think I had a title Christian humanist, because I mean it in a 15th century Christian history kind of way. Like, Christians are supposed to follow Matthew 25 and care about the fellow man. And I think it's very Christianly to want to build hospitals, and it's very Christianly to want to feed people that are hungry and stuff like that. And so I call myself a Christian humanist. And I remember Sabella kind of fired at me and said, "You can't be a Christian and a humanist." And I was like, oh, yes, you can. And you know, looking at church history and classical understanding, I totally believe you can. But that being said, we kind of collided that first time, and I was getting sworn at and stuff. And I have to say, I did poke at Sabella. I did a little digging, and I found out some not flattering videos, and I kind of giggled about it. But then I have to say,
oh, I think I know where you found those.
Sabella has grown. She has grown in a way that I go, wow, she's more articulate. She's calmer. She's less mean.
And not only that, she's less likely to take herself too seriously now as well.
She's willing to laugh. She's educated. She's bettering herself, and because she's bettering herself and she's educated and she sounds intelligent and calm, and she's likable, Gman doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Well, when I first met Bruce, he and I ended up in a very loud yelling match, and when I first met Sabella, it wasn't much better. But by this point, I like both of them.
Yeah.
Quick question: Has
people change?
It's the difference between knowing the picture and the name and getting to know the person. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of these evangelics, is that they come on here yelling and screaming over the name and their assumptions about somebody's belief, instead of getting to know the person and finding out who they are and what they actually stand for. There's a huge difference.
Yeah, I've always been fond of Bruce and Sabella, and they know that. I've known them for a very long time. And they went through a lot of crap here on the internet. Let's just put it that way. And that's how that really infamous video that everyone knows about came about. And they had a really rough time of it, not only here on the internet, but in their real life. And they finally got to a place where they could be together and they could put aside the people who were, both physically and on the internet, the people who were causing them problems, and get into a really good space and start doing some productive stuff. And that is wonderful. I'm so thrilled for both of them that they are where they are now. And it was a struggle. I'm aware of it. But yeah, what you said, you have to know people. It's the old saying of walking a mile in someone's shoes. You have to know someone. You have to know, where they come from, and what they've been through. And we don't know all of those things. So we have to exercise some charity for others. Up until the point that those people keep trampling on our charity and then pissing on it. And by the way, that's not Bruce and Sabella. They've never done anything like that.
No, and it's funny. It was just more like swearing, which
yeah.
I get sweared out every day at my job. So it's, I'm pretty good at dealing with that part. I'm like, yeah, okay, I know you're upset, but I think my point is that there seems to be some sort of change and more gentleness and heart being shown. And while she does giggle sometimes at the things that sometimes we giggle at, her approach has been more gentle. And while I it seems to me as an outsider that I see growth both in education and her personal wellness and her ability to talk to people that maybe are, stranger danger and maybe slightly annoying. It's definitely improved. And as she's improved, they've been crapping on her.
Sadly, years ago, I hoped for improvement in Gman, and there was this brief moment that seemed like there was going to be, and then he met Brett Keane, and yeah, let's not go down that road. At this point, I think he's kind of beyond hope. I'm sure God still has hope for him if there is such a being, but, that's a different matter entirely. I'm not quite that loving, we'll just say. Not that magnanimous, thank you, honey.
Drag's been really quiet.
He's doing science.
So I was on the phone call. Well, if you saw the side chat, you saw who I just got done talking to, and yeah, there's some stuff I need to say offline.
Okay, I did invite him.
Well, guys, this is the end of the stream. Bye.
No.
Yeah, I'll
thought we still had another topic.
So this ended up more Bible study like than I expected, because I generally try not to subject atheists to Bible study, but I appreciate you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a bad influence.
No. You because you are a writer, you've always been able to hang with the Bible, I've noticed. Because you're like, yeah, East of Eden's based on the Old Testament. like
I care about literature, and to me I don't see it as a holy book. I do see it as literature, and as such, and being influential literature, there's value in that.
Yeah, how can you possibly, the history of my country, how can you possibly understand history without understanding the culture that goes behind it?
Spicy curry, bland curry, spicy curry, bland curry. There we go.
That is something fascinating, actually, because if you go through English literature, you're correct. A lot of English literature, English literature classes that you take here locally, and this is California, liberal California, they require you to grab a Bible and to see the biblical narratives in it.
Well, just look at Shakespeare. Perfect example. They all believed in God in those stories.
Well, the thing is, if you understand the different voices and the different narrative styles within the text, it can actually be kind of a fun read. And this is something that's lost on a lot of people. I often say that my favorite author was Jay. Jay was one that wrote the second creation story, which I know people will fuss about that it's just one. But you have the priestly voice in the beginning of Genesis, then you have the one line of the revisionist, and then it goes on to Jay. And Jay is... the way that she paints the picture is much different. It's like an old woman telling stories about the fire, and there's something to me that's beautiful about that. And if you put a little spin on it, it's really fun. You know, God sits there and brings all the animals before Adam, and among them, he didn't find a helpmeet. At this point, the kids around the fire laugh because this is obviously a joke that's in there. But this is something that's lost on most Christians because they don't get that. Oh, well, clearly bestiality wasn't the way to start. Adam did not find a helpmeet among them. So God laid him down to God a rib, and you keep going through the narrative. But there's these little jokes and these little quips in there that would, for kids hearing it around the campfire, the kids would be laughing their butts off. They'd be having a grand old time with it. And somehow those voices have been silenced by most modern Christians. And I find that a little disappointing.
Yeah, I'm going to drop out. Just take a look in the side chat if you haven't already. Don't repeat that out loud for obvious reasons, but hit me up when you guys go off air. Thanks for inviting me.
Did you repost that in the green chat while you're gone?
Yes, I will put it in the outside chat so you are kept abreast.
There's a lot of different people in the outside
Thanks,
chat.
Doc.
Ooh, yeah, I'll send it to you on Facebook, Jim,
Yeah.
or I'll send it to you on Google Plus privately.
Thanks, Doc.
This does not need to be said out loud, but it's very interesting. So, thanks for the invite, folks. I will see you guys a little later.
Good to have you. Oh, wait, I'm not the host. Why am I saying that? I'm too used to hosting. Ah.
Good to have you. Okay, well, I do appreciate you guys coming in here. Does Jade have any thoughts? Because I feel like we've kind of, because of your mic and just we tend to be verbose. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about in particular?
Well, I think you guys did a good job, and in some ways, I feel that it's better to let you talk about this than me. In some ways.
I thought I'd volunteer. Since Gman wants to believe that you're a Christian, to do so, you have to condemn one of your own. Go ahead and condemn me. Here's a rock.
Yeah, I can't do that. And as far as, I'm not answerable to Gman for anything. I'm only answerable to God. And last I checked, Gman is not God. And as far
Thank God for that.
Yeah, no kidding. And as far as like repenting goes, the things that I have repented for most, or when I have mistreated other people, that's the part that causes my heart to ache when I have made these mistakes, because I have violated that most precious of commandments, to love others as ourselves. As for anything else, it's between it's between me and God, not between me and Gman. I don't have to respond to him. I don't have to reply to him. He's a little man with a little voice and very little knowledge of the Bible and of Christ's word. If he wants to attack me, he can go ahead and do so. I've got a pretty solid ego. I've been around for a while, and I have a background in radical politics back in the 70s. So I've endured a lot, and things got pretty rough sometimes back in the day. So I've endured a lot in that sense. And in other ways, I've been extremely blessed in my life, so many ways, including having my good friends here on the internet stand up for me. So, yeah, I'm not going to respond to anything Gman says, because there's no need for me to do so. And if at any time he ever actually wanted my position on anything, he could have simply asked me. But he didn't bother. Neither have his little friends bothered to ask me what my position was on something. And I don't see any need to, volunteer. Because if you want to know, just ask. I'm not exactly very reticent, as some of you have noticed. I pretty much speak my mind. That's
Jade
all I
is
have
not
to
a
say.
shark. Throwing chum in the water will not attract her attention. All he seems to be doing is trying to bait you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the problem is, though, that... Sorry, Jade, on you go.
I was just going to say I find it vastly amusing, and I'd honestly rather him come at me than some other people.
On the other hand, there are plenty of people that are more than happy to come after him without you even asking or anything because, well, you're Mama Jade.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that really does do my head in over this is that in the process of doing this, he brings the faith into disrepute.
Yeah.
He makes our faith look awful. And that's the hardest part of it to swallow. That we may be lumped in with him, where it's all about hate.
And you know, I want to add something to that thought. I think the Christians that get the end of his flack or watch all the bullshit that he comes out with, I could imagine if I was one of those Christians that I might think, is this what Christianity is? You know, I can imagine the self-doubt. So the fact that they say, no, this isn't what Christianity is supposed to be about at all, that's because they've read the Bible, they understand what it means, you know. They've read the Jesus stuff, whereas Gman's only seems to have read the Paul stuff. You know, he only he selects the Bible verses that can best attack someone, rather than select the Bible verses that show the love. And I remember a while back when, you know, atheists would talk about, you know, slavery or something like that. And he would say, oh, you just, you know, and Veckel would do the same, you know, you're just using emotional arguments. And yet, let's have a look, you know, maybe you want to read it again, Fiona, or just state it again about, you know, what's it, John 3:16. What's it about? Love.
And can I say
Is that an emotion? That's an emotional thing, isn't it?
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. It's all based on love.
Yeah.
There's something I find rather amusing. Gman does seem to miss the message of love. And yet, in his videos, you may notice he has on his wall the letters love. And they're crooked.
Ironic. Or more so fitting.
Sorry, Jade, repeat that part at the end.
They're crooked.
Yes, love. He has letters love on his wall, but they're all crooked.
Well, he had it hanging upside down for a while.
I know.
Wonderfully symbolic, actually.
Well, I think sometimes, and this is a little bit of armchair psychology, but that's what I love to do. It's a little side hobby of me. I love psychology. I think it's interesting, but I do think that our perception of God and our filter and understanding of religion is very affected by our parents. And if you have a harsh environment, you might think that God is harsh. You know? Like it might be, and if you can be compassionate towards somebody that's thinking that God is this evil monster, and as Shanna Rocky once put it, and if you look at Shanna Rocky, now Shanna Maudi's video, Worshiping the Darkness, some of these people are looking at a God who is pretty dark and has some of the worst traits that humans have.
Closer to the demiurge than the God of the Bible.
Yeah. You know, that makes a lot of sense. I came from a very loving family. I mean, my parents and step-parents were incredible. And the nuns that taught me when I, from first grade, I went through from first grade to halfway through fifth grade, and then we moved, were extremely loving. They were wonderful. And then when I went back to Catholic school and high school, the same thing. They demanded quite a bit of us. I went from my high school to UCLA. My high school was harder than UCLA. But it was, they demanded the best of us. I remember one of the first things freshman year in high school, they said they would call us by our last names. Like, for instance, I would be called Miss Binder because we were to remember who we were. We were young ladies, and we were expected to act like them. So we were called, Miss whatever. And of course, sometimes the tone of voice was Miss Binder.
It's years since I've been accused of being a lady.
I I would like to get Max, the Catholic fusionist, insight on this, if he may, real quick, since he's kind of fresh and new.
Yeah, but his bed's not made, so his arguments are invalid.
All right. Well, I've been thinking about Gman for the last couple of days, because if there's anyone who's brought out what I consider to be the worst in me on this online platform, it would be him. And it's because there are times when you have tried to give him give him some kind of guidance, he doesn't listen. And at times when he's at his best, at his worst, he just attacks you and your character, and that's a person that's very hard to love. And all I could say is this: by any chance, if Gman is listening, you have plenty of time. You can change your attitude. It's not about it. It isn't actually about what you believe, because believe me, in a lot of respects, I'm almost as conservative as Gman is, if not more so. My views on birth control are far more conservative than his is. I don't even think that contraception. I think contraception is sinful, for starters. I've defended biblical slavery. Like him, I will stick up. Like him, I will stick up for things that our atheist friends find very politically incorrect. But at the same time, despite that, I still manage to hold my own in conversation, talk to people. I can show some
care
humility.
about others. You can empathize. You can show humility. You can do all kinds of things that seem beyond his capabilities at this time.
You know, wait. I just want to finish though. And believe me, that takes practice, but a lot of it involves just hanging around the right kind of people, not in echo chambers. And if Gman treated his live life, by which I mean his life on camera, the same way he is offline, I think he'd do much better. And if he wanted to, he could just start hanging around with other people and just get to know them as people. And once you do that, I'm pretty sure you can go much farther. And I know it can be tough because he took on this role of being an evangelical. He's been around people who have deconverted. I'm pretty sure that kind of thing can suck for you. But on the other hand, I'm pretty sure if you have a strong life in prayer, that you can pray for others, that you can show love for your enemies. And if you consider atheists your enemies, that's fine. You can still love them. If you do that, then I'm pretty sure this kind of online life won't get to you. Go ahead, Cliff.
You know, Max and I have had some fun discussions in our time. But as much, I mean, for example, he and I butted heads probably, 3 years ago? Maybe even 4 now. About Thomas Aquinas and first mover, first cause kind of stuff, you know. And, you know, it was pretty, you know, it wasn't terrible. I mean, you know, we not shouted at each other, but we just kept going over and over again. And, you know, it was... But even though we were disagreeing in quite strong ways, it wasn't hateful. It was, no, I disagree with you, and here's why. And we would just plod over and over again. And we're like grinding the ideas down into the dirt. There was nothing but dust around us from these ideas that we were melting together to try and hammer out, you know, what we believed and, you know, not believed. But even though, you know, at one point it's like, I can't do this anymore, Max left, you know. A day later, He thought about it and thought, you know what, I was a bit of a jerk there. Sorry about that, mate. You know, that kind of thing. And we've been fine. Even then, even when Max was having a tough time, he still had the humility to say, look, mate, I was sorry. I was out of order. That wasn't cool. And of course, you know, we're forgiving people. You know, I've acted the same kind of way. And people who give a shit about me forgive you. They forgive you immediately because that's what you're supposed to do with your friends. I consider Max a really good friend. You know, we may disagree on the religion thing, but there are plenty of other things we agree. We agree on. Although I think he's an idiot because he's a Patriots fan. But,
oh, those rings.
Oh dear me! But no, like I say, you know, I can have friends with people that don't believe in what I believe. Isn't it strange how Gman can't? He has to fight anybody who disagrees with him. You know, and that will include people who agree with most of the time, but he gets something wrong, and then he needs to fight against them to prove that he wasn't, you know, wasn't an idiot or didn't get it wrong. You know, he'll rail against them for weeks because they called him out on being wrong on something because he's not as smart as he thinks. You know, this is the problem that you get with Gman. He cannot accept correction. He will not accept correction, whereas other people do, and that's why you have respect for people, because, you know, whether that correction is behavior or whether that correction is, you know, like, okay, we didn't do very well there, or, you know, we could do better, you know, and that goes on both sides. I'm not just, you know, it's not a one-way street. Gman treats it as a one-way street. He can get away with himself being sinful, but then will, you know, demand other people repent of their sins. What a hypocrite!
Repent, saith the Gman. You know, Baldy the Limey, who I interviewed on the Holy Spackle channel, did say something to Gman that I thought was funny. Baldy is a Catholic, very snarky, and just by his very voice, he always sounds condescending. And he's like, "No, this is just me being normal," but he's just got a kind of posh British voice. And he finally just lost it with Gman as politely as you can lose it, no swearing or anything like that. But he said, "Oh, Pope Gman, excommunicating." and it kind of is like, that's where I got the Pope Gman meme actually that I made. It's because he actually, while he condemns the Catholic Church, and the Pope himself, he almost tries to assume that position in our little community, which is strange, trying to excommunicate people. I remember one time tuning into Evangelist Ken, and they were excommunicating Phony Beatlemaniac. And literally, and I find Ken likable, even though he says crazy things, but he's like, "And Phony Beatlemaniac, I excommunicate you." And I'm like, from what? From what?
You in a church.
What are we excommunicating Phony Beatlemaniac from? And I remember complaining about it. Like, what do you think? What power do you have? And here's where I quote the Labyrinth: "You have no power over me." Take that.
He can excommunicate him from the Bad Spellers Club.
Well, isn't it a good job that Jesus didn't announce that the Good Samaritan should be excommunicated for being a Samaritan? He wouldn't have been able to use the parable then. That just seems to get missed. And as Cliff said, him and Max, they got on fine. And yet they are polar opposites when it comes to faith. Isn't that what the parable of the Good Samaritan's all about? All this stuff we get about don't fellowship with non-believers. What?
Pretty sure Jesus did.
Well, hang on. On that note, I just need to ask Max the usual question. So, Max, you an atheist yet?
Nope, still pretty strong in my faith.
Shut the fuck up.
Wait, he has to do his part now.
In fact, in interacting with people, I've become kind of heartened with my faith because I've, in just my online participation, I know one guy who gave me a private message who told me that because of me and the blogging network that I ran on Medium, he actually went from being a Calvinist to being a Catholic. And
Wow.
and I knew of another, and of course Frank, who's in our community, because of his prolonged interaction, he became a theist. Although he's looking into Christianity right now and seeing if he wants to go full on Christian or to stay in the general theist direction.
Frank, you're already a good apologist. Just go full on Christian. You're already halfway there.
Ah, darn. Oh, well. We didn't quite go down the road you want. I can never necessarily count on a prompt from Epi. Always surprised me in the last moment because he didn't turn around and say,
Are you a Christian yet?
Just so I could say, yeah.
Are you Christian yet?
No.
What was it?
No, the gag was that one shuffle that I'm like, are you still a Christian? And you're like, yeah. Are you still an atheist? I'm like, yeah.
Oh, I get it.
There are people though that have swung over that I haven't announced and stuff, but there are people that I have spoken with that have originally been atheists that are now theists, and that happens. It's not just Frank, and I don't want to put them on blast, but I'm trying to say like there are people that do swing over one way or the other. We often hear about deconversions, but there are conversions as well, and I don't think we convert people by beating people up. I think it's honest searching.
It's showing a better way. It's showing that kindness, showing that you're able to love one another. It's that whole kind of thing. I mean, if you approach somebody from a place of spite, really, you're not going to get too far.
Well, and Veckel himself said that he became a Christian because he was out of fear. He converted originally, and it's in my interview with Veckel, because of fear. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's where he maintains it, but a lot of these folks do think that's the motivator of why you become a Christian. Well, I'm a sinner. I don't want to go to hell.
And the people that really upset me the most are the ones that talk about that. Calvinists tend to be them, but they talked about their wretched scum and they're just worthless rags. And for me, this is the argument from the beaten wife. They're never going to be good enough in the eyes of their husband, and they deserve to be.
Well, all our good works are just filthy rags. It's a quote from Isaiah, I want to say, and there's some truth to that our very best isn't good enough to earn to heaven, but we're also the Imago Dei, and I think Protestants, particularly evangelical Americans, keep forgetting that you are made in the image of God, not just the Calvinists, not just. But when you look at your fellow human being, we're supposed to say, oh, we're made in the image of God. The Buddhists say they honor the divinity in you, which I know will make people cringe that I would even say that. But I think that a Christian would honor God's workmanship. And it might make an atheist bulk, but I would think that it's very Christianly to honor another human being, not bow down to them or anything, but to appreciate and love someone.
Yeah, it's just that effectively people have been broken down. The people I was talking about a moment ago, think they're just wretched people. And, it's like, you got to be broken down in order to be built up in the light of Jesus kind of stuff. And that just, it just sickens me, to be honest. I find that one of the worst things. I understand that is one of the faith position parts, but I find it kind of upsetting.
If I could probably bring up one passage of scripture, I love God I obey God not out of fear, but out of love. And that was in John. And the understanding is, if you compare and contrast that to the passages where one is to obey God out of fear, I think what something has to be known. When you're kids, you do things because you're afraid of the repercussions of not doing it. When you're a kid, you brush your teeth because you obey your parents, not because you're knowledgeable enough to know that it's good for you, but because you're kind of afraid of consequences, like being grounded or going into timeout or something, or having something taken away from you. So you do that out of fear, but as you grow older and mature and you apply your knowledge, you know that what you were raised to do, what you were disciplined to do, is good for you as a human being. And I think when Jesus speaks to people, when you hear Jesus speak about the repercussions of hellfire, or the Bible speaks of fear of the Lord, it's speaking to people who need to begin their spiritual journey as infants, who don't know how good the spiritual life is. But once you get in the hang of it, you don't do things because of the fact that there are repercussions to be had, but you do things because you realize that such things are good for you, and you can just know it in your religious experience. At a certain point, St. Paul wasn't afraid of hellfire, because he himself said, if I could be cut off, I mean, if I would be damned to hell, just so my Jewish brethren can get into heaven, I would do that for them. And unfortunately for Paul, Paul knew that that's not how it worked. But to show that kind of kind of love over fear, I think, is really the heart of spiritual maturity.
Actually goes back to what my wife read earlier.
Mm-hmm. See, Paul can be helpful too.
See, that's another one that Gman likes to use hell, to condemn people all the time.
Yeah, but you know what? You have no power over me, He is not the vicar of Christ. He is not Christ himself. He has no power over me.
And he's certainly not a damn church unto himself.
Yeah, and I know I've even questioned about his church attendance even and participation.
As far as I know, he's still unchurched, and I'm willing to bet that if he got into one at this point, he'd get kicked out for insisting that they were wrong.
So I'm going to actually close this, but I had a closing verse I wanted to read. When people try to say I'm unsaved and going to hell and for whatever reason, a couple things do come up to mind, and one of the verses that I think of is in Romans 8, and it says, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, nor angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything in creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." You can't pluck me out of God's hand, though you may try, and maybe unwittingly so. And you can't do that to other people. But you can be a stumbling block. You can burden people further. People that have natural inclinations, natural struggles. You can burden them to the point of great stress, and that's not fair. So, G-Man, I'm going to say this. There is no fear in love. And that's St. Tommy's favorite verse, by the way. Shout out to St. Tommy. And also, I wanted to say that, G-Man, read your Bible and do what it says.
Especially the New Testament.
Burn. That was beautiful.